Good morning. This is Pramod Nair of the Department of English, the University of Hyderabad. And in this particular lesson, we shall be looking at the question of the non-human. We'll have the lesson in two parts. We have already looked at concepts such as companion species and multi-species thinking, which effectively puts together two key questions or concerns: the nature of the non-human and the human-non-human relationship. Companion species concept and idea and shall we say theoretical frame, though I'm not sure it can be called a frame, is an approach to interspecies collaboration, responsibility, as Donna Haraway splits the term into response and ability, and multi-species, drawing primarily from the work of ethnographers such as Anat Singh and others. Both of these are about how the human world interacts with, impacts the non-human, and the relationship between the human and the non-human. So let's take, and several of these, by the way, I should remind you, draw upon things that we have already touched upon in passing when looking at, say, animal studies and the contribution that animal studies has made to post-humanist thought. So the question of the non-human, the animal. Several philosophical traditions have approached the animal question, as it's called, differently. Is the animal at the center of creation? Are animals superior to humans, the same or inferior? What happens when we downgrade an animal or animals because they don't have language as we define it? As in, they may communicate, but we do not see them as possessing a language because humans define language in a particular way. There is, of course, the crucial question of animal suffering. Then there is the animal within the human, where, for example, civilization or development or evolution is seen as a method of removing the animal within us. And you do know that when people have behaved badly, like serial killers or rapists or whatever it might be, we refer to them as, oh, they were animals. They behaved like animals. The assumption is that there is an animal within us, and civilization is the removal of the animal elements from within us. Then there is a question or concern as to whether the animal possesses its own subjectivity, whether it has interiority. What is the link between the oppression of animals by humans and the oppression of some humans by other humans? You will recall what we have already said from Carrie Wolf and others, that if we permit the holocaust of animals, one day we will be happy to or prepared to or turn a blind eye to the holocaust of humans, that one inevitably leads to the other. Then it, of course, as in posthumanism and its philosophical traditions that it draws upon, propose a relational view of the human, non-human existence, that it's not a segregated but a coexistence model, right? And this is very important. So we will look at a few key concepts in how in the definitions and the way the non-human has been theorized within posthumanist thought. I mentioned companion species a little while ago, but the idea of companion species draws upon a much older biological concept called symbiosis. We do know that there are creatures that live in conjunction with other creatures, right? You see little white birds on buffaloes, for instance. We know lichens are a group of fungi living with algae or cyanobacteria. And we know that there is a close relationship between several kinds of fungi and plant roots. In mycorrhiza, for example, the fungal body enters into the roots of plants. And then those plants that lack chlorophyll are supported by the fungi, which means fungi provide the minerals, the nutrients necessary for the plants to survive. The point here is all life forms have some form of dependency upon other life forms. I mentioned this example before, and it's a very common knowledge actually, that humans are able to digest because of the presence of a certain kind of bacteria in our stomachs, in our alimentary tracts, which means to say that we provide the bacteria a certain kind of nutritional environment. They help us process the food we eat. For people like Donna Haraway, the history of dogs can be narrated only as a history with humans. What do we mean by this? It means very simply that you cannot separate the life history of dogs unless you look at the way dogs have been and remain a part of human life. So even when species and life forms have their own very distinct materialities, very unique materialities, they still emerge out of a certain encounter with other materialities. So you might want to think of life forms as surviving through mutual dependency, which would be symbiosis, right? Symbiosis effectively leads us to the point that animals, that is the non-humans, and the humans, a variation of the animal too, as we all know, have enmeshed histories. That is, you need to think of humans and non-humans embedded in an enmeshed history where one cannot be separated from the other. Humans, we know, tend to anthropomorphize animals. You put them out there as extensions of the human. You treat them as pets that belong to the human, which means animals are also a part of the circuit, that the human, non-human commodity circuit includes the non-human as well, that the animal is brought into the circuit of life, which includes the human. And you could take and think of multiple examples in human history. Animals designed for agricultural purposes, right? Plowing the field. Animals used in war. Animals used as pets. Animals used for animal testing processes in the laboratories where we test medicines and other things on them. Animals as entertainment. Now think about this. The history of the animal in many species is the history of their interaction with the human, and vice versa. That humans have coexisted with, depended upon, lived with the non-human, and you no longer find it easy to separate the two, at least in history. This means to say that the non-human is also socially constructed. What do we mean by this? We have looked at this in animal studies. We construct them as pets. We construct them as monsters, terrifying creatures. We construct them as help, seeing eye dogs, guide dogs, rescue dogs. We see them as spectacles, which means the animal is not just flesh and blood. The animal possesses a certain value. The animal possesses a certain status that the humans bestow upon them. So when we say, oh, the Saint Bernard is a great rescue dog, what we are saying is, historically, the Saint Bernard has been constructed as a useful dog for a particular set of purposes. You use dogs or cats or various animals as spectacle, as pets. Then you will have exhibitions or people who put together water worlds and things like that, where you can see the dolphin or the shark or whatever it might be. You can think of reviving certain animals for the sake of commercial profit and entertainment. That's the premise, of course, of Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park, eventually, of course, a Steven Spielberg film of the same title. Which means we are looking at animals that are socially constructed, not just as animals, but as appendages to, as adjuncts to the human world. And this is an important factor that we have to keep in mind, because of a very simple reason. When they are socially constructed, either as helpers, as working dogs or war dogs, they become a part of a power relation in which the humans have enormous, near total power over the animal. So it's not just enough to say, oh, the dog is a pet, or the dog is a rescue dog, or the ox is useful in the agricultural field, or the guinea pig or the canary are used to serve particular purposes. Canaries are sent into mines before the humans go in to test whether it's safe enough, as we know. The point is, when the human is enmeshed along with the non-human, the human retains pretty much all power over the non-human creature, right? As Donna Haraway would say, being a pet seems to me a demanding job for a dog, requiring self-control and canine emotional and cognitive skills, matching those of good working dogs. Dogs become a part of a category called good working dogs. And they have to be trained, which means to say, just as we train children, workers, women, right, to perform certain functions, to possess certain attitudes, if they need to have a value, the dogs will have to have training, which shapes their emotional and cognitive skills in ways that the humans require and determine. Companion species are seen to be relating to us in forms that they call, or rather Haraway calls, plural relating. That means we can have, as in the humans can have, multiple relationalities with different forms of life. As Panos Comparatiaris calls it, plural relating is one that regards potential partnerships with all existence on Earth, irrespectively of their biological and cognitive status, from insects to dogs and bacteria to pigeons. What's important here is to recognize that companion species, working dogs, all of those are actually systems of power. Human, non-human relations are not neutral. They may be built on sentiment, for example, when you have pets, but it still remains a power relation because the animal doesn't have agency, doesn't have free will. It may have to a limited extent. And they're subject to our whims and fancies, right? For example, the crisis about dog bites that we have seen in the recent past across the country, and the question that animal rights activists are asking about not only the control of the stray population, but also about how humans have trained children to behave in certain ways. How do you instill a fear of the animal, and how animals therefore respond, not because they are just animals, but because they are part of a dynamic. They're part of a system of power relations. And when their abilities or will is curbed, then they respond in certain ways. So that's an important part to keep in mind when we speak about companion species or plural relating. Our next theme, again a term coined by Donna Haraway, is nature cultures. Companion species, Donna Haraway argues, disturbs the distinction between nature and culture. Species across the life spectrum have their own histories, but their histories are also part of or enmeshed with the histories of other life forms. Think of agricultural animals or domesticated animals. Can you, like I said a few minutes ago, say that you can think in terms of the ox or the dog as separate from, as their history is separate from that of humans? No, you can't. Donna Haraway uses the term nature culture to refer to the co-becoming of different species in symbiotic relations, that the shared identity of species over years of evolution And this emphasizes relationality over separation, that identity of a species is actually forged in collaboration with, in tandem or conjunction with other life forms, other species. This is an emphasis of relationality over segregation or separation. Haraway argues that history or technoscience and biology cannot be separated. You can't. Because the human non-human colonization, the human non-human colonial setup, whether it's over other people or other species, is a very complicated procedure. Effectively, this means how humans have managed to manipulate species borders, to domesticate creatures, to characterize some regions as wilds or bioreserves, contemporary developmental term. This is not a simple equation. That multi-species ethnography, which people talk about, can often also be uneven, because capitalism, as we know from our section on and our module on biocapitalism, capitalism will make use of flesh, of matter, of biological matter, of biological life. So the question is, how is the human-non-human relationship a part of any exploitative relationship? What are the terms? When Haraway speaks about co-becoming, the point she is making is there is a certain biological history, which we call nature with a capital N. But this natural history is embedded in a social history or a certain cultural set of cultural norms. This is what she calls co-becoming. The pathways or life ways of species emerge from shared conditions of relationality, that you don't evolve on your own, that you don't become what you are on your own. You co-become with others. And these others can also include, do not forget, machines. As we have spoken about in our early modules, posthumanist thought says we co-become and we co-evolve with other life forms, but also with the non-living, which means we evolve with technology, with machines, or whatever else it might be. But it's important to recognize that life ways are emergent conditions, and they emerge from a shared condition of relationality. Moving from symbiosis to nature cultures, the next obvious step here is critical animal studies, which moves from principles of philosophies of equality to political activism. So they say that it's not enough to just speak about principles and philosophies, you need to be actively intervening. Critical animal studies speaks of the linkages between various forms of human oppression and something we have already looked at, speciesism. The argument they make is that the minute we, as in the humans, determine who can live and who cannot, in the case of other humans, we extend this power, this control, this management over other life forms. This is what we have referred to periodically in the last few weeks as speciesism, right? The binary of nature versus culture has created a hierarchy where human culture is over and above all other life forms. But they also say that the conversion of animals into objects, capitalism, bad labor markets, bad conditions of, say, animal killings, all of these are about animals being made into labor, into products. And please recall what we have said about biocapitalism. And I did mention the fact that biocapitalism is not only about human life capital, it's also about the non-human which has been rendered into capital. Critical animal studies demands that we, as in humans, generate a certain ethical commitment to other life forms. The crucial part here is to recognize relationality as the cornerstone of evolution. As people after Lynn Margulis and others have argued, evolution proceeds through cooperation, not necessarily by just competition. which was the Darwinian model. This means that you cannot think of human evolution without also thinking of how humanity has evolved with other life forms. This means that nature culture, which is one word, there's no hyphen, there's no break, there's no slash. Nature culture is how nature becomes a part of culture. That what we define as nature is our definition of nature. So when we say that about dogs, it's pretty much the same thing. So for critical animal studies, we have subject animals to power, to unequal rights, to horrific systems of genocide and extermination, but also into forms of labor. And I mentioned labor towards the end a few minutes ago. So a binary like humans, non-humans, means that the humans are in power, means that the humans have the upper hand, and this must go. So for critical animal studies, it's not enough to say, oh, we take care of our pets, or that the non-human is important to us. It's important to transform a philosophy of the non-human into the political activism of the non-human, which means we start thinking of, say, animal rights. We start thinking of animal freedom. We start thinking of animal free will. We also, because ethologists will tell us this, we also need to understand animal behavior. Are they responding to what we have done with their worlds, with their habitats, or are they responding to us? Which means to say that when we talk about the non-human, we not only think of relationality and questions of power, we examine how they are subject to whims and fancies, pity and sentiment, because that's also a form of power, and how we need to rethink this particular equation. Now, granted that in environmental humanities and posthumanism, there's a certain romanticization of this, there's a certain romantic view of animals, and things are not so clear-cut. So there's a considerable amount of debate about animal rights, as we know, but also about questions of the human-non-human relationship. Be that as it may, for posthumanism, the human-non-human relationship is a very, very crucial one.